In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Well, hello everybody. I'm John Towers. Welcome to the Abracast. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. We're gonna pick up right where we left off at the last media and emotions episode. So just to jog everybody's memory a little bit, we're reading from a scholarly work this evening, Media and Emotions by Werner Wirth and Holger Schramm. This was published by the Center for the Study of Communications and Culture in 2005. So we did the first part of this last month, and we're going to pick right up here, right after the last section we did was arousal and excitation, and that's part D. So we're picking right up here at part E, part Echo, which is called suspense. So thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Thank you for all your support. And we're just going to get right into this. We got a lot to go. We had a lot to do tonight. A lot to do. So if you are playing at home, this is when I need you to produce your vessel of the art and adhere to the formula of the weapon of mass distraction. Go ahead, whatever your weapon of mass distraction is, go ahead and whip it up. Mine is Jin Jihad, and I have an official vessel of the art, by the way. I'm sure you've heard all about it by now. So here you go. Here's to you, and here's to me, and here's to swimming with bow-legged women. Suspense. Recipient. Now, so I don't feel like I need to. I'm not summarizing the last episode at all. There was a lot of material there. We got through a lot of material, but we have an ongoing thread on the show of looking at media and media manipulation. Usually we talk about the news, right? However, sometimes, besides the news, we're also talking about fiction. The last bit of the last episode was about horror films. So I guess, my thought going into this is, when you're watching something and you are feeling something, I guess I just want, and I do this, and my wife's really good at it, taking a step out and being like, why does this make me feel like this? When you're watching the ASCPA, SPCPAs, whatever it is, with like the fucking beat up dogs and stuff, and you're like, oh, that's sad. And then Sarah McLaughlin's like, in the arms of an angel, or however, I guess this idea why I'm doing this is it's like I want to become more conscious of why media makes me feel like I feel. Like I fucking love revenge movies. So I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of psychology in that, I love watching someone get something awful done to them and then them just fucking taking it back. That's what I like. So But I'm also a sucker for like those commercials where returning servicemen surprise their families. Oh my God, you fucking get the Kleenex. Like I'm all about that. So I'm like, I want to understand more besides the obvious stuff. Obviously, yes, these commercials are supposed to make you feel something. That's the point. That's what I'm trying to get to is why, besides the setup and stuff, what other tricks are they playing? Another thing that I pay a lot of attention to are crime documentaries or like, reality TV shows. Like if you see something that's like, it's framed real cool, like a guy walking into like a dark room, but if you break it down, I've done storyboards for video and movie projects. So it's like, so if you break it down like a storyboard, you have to realize that there's already a cameraman in that room catching that awesomely framed silhouette shot. And so you're like, well, it's not that cool. If someone's in the room, it's cool for a movie, but they're trying to sell this to you for as reality TV, right? So I don't know. All this stuff is like, it seems obvious on the level, and like when you talk about it and when you dissect it, you're like, yes, douche. Of course there's a cameraman in the room already. But I want to get better at being in the moment and realizing it. Or like in crime documentaries, like when you're listening to something, there's ominous music. And you're like, well, what if the ominous music wasn't there? Would I still have the same feeling? That's right. Think about laugh tracks. There's a YouTube video, at least one. I don't know. There's probably a million YouTube videos where they take the laugh tracks out of Friends episodes. And you're just like, they're just supposed to be like Ross Geller's a psychopath. But just do it to any show that's got a laugh track. Put in like Last Man Standing, and he tells a joke, and it's like ha 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 ha, and you're like, oh, that was pretty funny. You're just responding to the laugh track. Like you would think that it's funny, but not like a laugh out loud like funny. Think of like the blinking applause sign in like the old TV shows about TV shows. When they want the studio audience to applaud, like the applause sign would go off. Like they're weaponizing their audience. It's very interesting. That's why we're doing this whole thing. It might sound redundant. I'm not exactly sure, but here we go. So suspense. Hold on. After all that. I summon forth the vessel of the art. Recipients, that's the audience, usually feel suspense because they do not know what is going to happen next in media. Fair. For example, back in the day, the writers did this. Back in the day, the writers created suspense. Nowadays, the director creates suspense because they change scripts. It's like if you listen to Rian Johnson's Last Jedi audio commentary, and he's like, well, I just did that because I thought it was funny. And you're just like, you ruined everything. You ruined the whole, he and J.J. Abrams have both ruined it, but he ruined J.J. Abrams' his chance at ruining everything. He double ruined it. It's like the Big Mac of ruination. I'm sorry. I'm talkative. I haven't recorded for a while. This is my first time in front of a microphone in quite a long time. So I'm chomping at the bit. For example, they experience fear because they do not know how the fate of the hero and are more excited. They do not know the fate of the hero and are more excited the less probable the happy ending seems to be for the protagonist. The media user goes through an inner conflict connected with the strong negative arousal until the conflict is resolved. But feeling of conflict and insecurity are not positive emotions per se. In daily life, insecurity is sometimes even connected with the feelings of anxiety. Why do media recipients experience suspense? positively during reception? Why do they consciously turn their attention to suspenseful media programs? Here, empirical communication research cannot offer clear-cut answers, and the reception phenomenon of the suspense has primarily been dealt with in the context of semiotics-oriented film studies and in hermeneutically oriented culture studies and popular culture research. Taken together across all disciplines, one can distinguish between psychological and text-oriented approaches to the explanation of suspense. While sociological approaches assume that suspense is determined by an interplay of various cognitive and affective constructs within an individual, the text-oriented approach to suspense have their starting point, the narrative structure of the text and the stories. Thus, the former approaches engage the feeling of insecurity experienced by the individual, while the latter approach engages the insecurity of the text and the story. So I think between these two things here is mood. Tonal, you have the tone and the mood of it. At this point, it's already become apparent that the, quote, truth, unquote, has to be somewhere in between. Recipients cannot feel insecure if the plot does not provoke insecurity. In the working group, hold on, blah, blah, blah. This is all study stuff. Oler and Needing and Brewer in 1985, Brewer and Lichtenstein 81 and 82, and Brewer and Ochska 88, Jose and Brewer. This Brewer guy's he gets around 84. They proposed a primary hermeneutical, I gotta look that up. I don't know what the fuck that means. Composition-oriented approach. Brewer distinguishes the event structure from the discourse structure of a plot. And a relation between event structure and the discourse structure determines the forms of the experience during the reception. Okay, so this hermeneutics or hermeneutological they're talking about, the quick definition. Sorry, I had to stop and look it up. The quick definition is the branch of knowledge that deals with interpretation, especially of the Bible or literary texts. So there we go. Whenever I butcher that, that's what it means. In terms of the form of experience, he differentiates between surprise structure, curiosity structure, and suspense structure. So-called initiating events play a central role in all three forms. Oh, this is interesting. You have to be initiated into this. Example, a murder was committed, but the murderer was not shown. Surprise develops through the resolution of the question of who the murderer is. In suspenseful texts, the initiating event occurs in the beginning. Example, a child has been kidnapped. Suspense develops by continuously asking whether the police will find the kidnappers. Subsequently, the media story or discourse structure will be told in the temporal logic of the series of events, or event structure. Indeed, the discourse structure is stretched by intervening information and accelerated by cuts. Suspense primarily arises through the anticipation of how the story will go, or by how the hopes of a happy ending. Not that kind of happy ending. Brewer's approach has been especially criticized because it does not distinguish between the local level or a single sequence and the global level or the whole plot. The film might have a different structure on the local level than on the global level, and a film could be suspenseful and generate curiosity and surprise all at the same time in this context. but the connections between these constructs would be one of particular interest. In his philosophical-oriented suspense concept, taking psychological constructs into consideration, Carroll distinguishes between local and global events, but suspense can be generated on both narrative levels. A plot is conceptualized as a question-answer relation for various scenes and events, and raises questions on a micro level, a single scene, as well as questions of a macro level, the whole plot. Then suspense is the state of anticipation of contradictory answers to these questions at the micro level and the macro level, and develops on first the desirability of courses or events or answers as consequences of the observation of the moral protagonist or the amoral protagonist, and second, the insecurity probability of the course of events. The plot would be sensed as suspenseful if the desired course of events seemed improbable, or if the undesired course of events seems probable. The effective disposition theory. Back to our old buddy Zillman. Hold on, I need to... Bring forth the vessel of the art. In his effective disposition theory, our old pal Zillman modeled a similar but much more differentiated and psychological well-founded reception mechanism. Zillman explains why suspense increases the more likable the spectators find the protagonist. This is interesting. And the more they sympathize with him empathically. Thus, the fundamental prerequisite for experienced suspense is an effective sympathy for the fate of the hero. Here, Zillman simply regards spectators as witness of the media event who actually cannot interfere with what happens, which is exactly why they are excited, because of this powerlessness. He rules out identification process in the sense of taking over roles or simulations in the recipient's mind. So this is interesting because I just brought up Star Wars out of hand a little bit ago, but this is interesting because this is something that we can talk about as far as these new Star Wars movies are the sequels we're talking about. Now I'm very passionate about Star Wars, or at least I used to be. I don't care about it at all anymore, other than lamenting. But if you go back in the archives, you go to the feature topic links down to, I think, ancient modern mythology, I think is the name of the link. Anyhow, I done like a couple episodes on Joseph Campbell, and I used the Star Wars metaphors, right, for them. And the thing is what he's talking about here, what this Zillman character is talking about is spectators find the protagonist the more likable the spectators find the protagonist, and the more they sympathize with him empathically, is how you increase suspense. I would guess that's how you increase anything as far as storytelling is concerned. Not necessarily empathically, but relatability. So in in the old Star Wars, everyone can find a character that they relate to, I would argue. And in the new Star Wars, the characters don't have any character. Like, it's difficult for you to be like, like, what's this person's flaw? Why do you identify with this person? And if it mentions it somewhere in the thing, it unravels it as it goes. And my favorite one is this Finn character, who is like, it starts off with like a stormtrooper that's seen some shit, and it should be a redemption arc, right? We've seen this echoes over and over again through Star Wars, like Han Solo, Lando Calrissian. Those are all redemption stories. Ultimately, Darth Vader is a redemption story. So you get this Finn, and he's like, oh my God, it's a stormtrooper that like helped slaughter a village, and he needs to redeem the blood that's on his hands. But as the story goes on, even within the movie, they introduce this whole thing it turns out that he's not really a stormtrooper. He's like a janitor. And for some reason, they just sent him on this fucking seek and destroy mission one day. And it was so traumatizing to him that he shook his imperial programming or whatever. And then, like, to add insult to injury, they replay that joke over and over again, where he's just, yeah, right, okay, we get it. The black guy is a fucking janitor. We understand it. Like, that's offensive on some level, but it's such a huge missed opportunity for this great redemption arc, you know? I don't know. I don't know why I spend so much time thinking. I've wasted probably years of my life thinking about Star Wars, and over the last few years it's just been like how much I want to wipe my ass with it and not think about it anymore because it's so fucked up. I'm sorry for that mental image, everybody. I guess I was really amped up, and now I just fucking depressed myself. All right, it's still early. Let's see if I can get back into this. Let's see if I can get back into this game. Here's going to be my own redemption arc. We're going to get back into this. The approaches primarily explain the formation of suspense, but not so much why the recipients engage with this suspenseful media programs. What makes this suspense experience so attractive? On the basis of Zillman's excitation transfer theory, it is plausible that the relief and the euphoria of a happy ending is more positive the more suspenseful and stressing the film was. You know, this reminds me of like Marathon Man, like back in 76 or 7 or whatever it was. God damn, that movie was crazy. But how can the fascination for suspenseful plots that are not resolved by happy endings be explained? Vorder describes suspense as the experience of anxiety under playful conditions. Anxiety during the reception of fictional content occurs under conditions controlled by the medium. That is why one can talk about the as if anxiety, the quote, as if anxiety, unquote. The recipients know about the mediality and the fictionality, and thus we are aware of that on one hand. They can exit from the reception situation anytime they want. And then on the other hand, the content is not real and therefore not really threatening. The experience of, quote, as if anxiety, unquote, however, presents valuable life experience that may in the end help coping with a comparable real life situation. Personality traits and the pleasure of anxiety may also partially explain the devotion to suspenseful as if anxiety evoking media programs. You want to experience as if anxiety? Let your student loans be sold to my student loan guys, because they cause some fucking anxiety. We're moving on to the next section. Speaking of fear and anxiety, media programs do not only invoke as if anxiety, emotions in the context of playful media usage, but also cause a state of anxiety comparable to those outside media usage, according to Crone, 1996. Anxiety is an affective state of the organism characterized by increased activity of the autonomic nervous system, as well as the self-perception of arousal and the feeling of intense and of being tense and experience of being threatened. and increased in apprehensiveness. Investigations of anxiety use behavioral observations. That means that they look at the facial expressions, the defensive motor movements, psychological measures such as heart rate, sweating, accelerated respiration, and self-reports like questionnaires and whatnot. I would like to hook someone up to one of these things and play some CNN for them for a night. 3 nights. We have to get 3 nights to get a good data set, I bet. We'll do it for 3 nights. Strap someone up to this. And it's like global warming, blah, 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 Nazis, fascism, Trump, blah, 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 blah. Vaccinations. Normally, despite the basis towards the subject, self-reports are used because one cannot unambiguously infer the types of intensity of the emotion experienced on the basis of the first 2 measurement procedures. In communication research, one does not really talk of anxiety, but rather of fear and fright reactions because of the menace coming from the media program, usually cannot be determined unequivocally in their cultivation studies. Gerber and colleagues have shown that the reception of media programs can lead to fear and anxiety. Frequent TV viewers, for example, have exaggerated ideas about how many persons are involved in cases of violence per week. We've talked about the CNN effect on here before. Very interesting. And correspondingly have inappropriately high levels of anxiety. In particular, those groups of persons depicted in the media relatively more often as victims overestimate violence. This goes along with an increased sensitivity of anxiety. Winterhoff-Spirk, which sounds like one of those Urban Dictionary sex positions, differentiated Gerber's concept. TV has a cultivating effect on a unitary long-term memory one storage concept. By distinguishing between the personal real, medial real, and medial fictional knowledge storage, that's the 3 storage concept. According to this, TV does not have the same cultivating effect on all knowledge stores. It sounds like they're talking about like Lieutenant Commander Data. On the basis of reality presented in television, the medial real storage is involved in the first place because the spectators receive ideas about aspects of the world they cannot immediately experience themselves. In contrast, effects on the judgment of one's personal real world can only rarely be observed. If one considers how terrorist attacks in Israel or in the United States are described in media, it is possible to explain why many persons have the same critical judgment about the security situation in those countries without drawing conclusions on their own security. On the background, Gerber's result in increased TV reception would have an effect of increasing anxiety as to be reconsidered critically. Anxiety should only arise if presented TV content can be stored directly in the personal real storage. Or anxiety arousing knowledge can be transformed from the medial real or even the medial fictional storage to the personal real storage. Nevertheless, the hypothesis is maintained that sensing anxiety is cultivated by TV in a certain way. This cultivation has positive effects too because individuals are sensitized for states of anxiety through contact with anxiety-invoking media. Content and are prepared for coping with the states of anxiety in the real world. The strategies for coping with anxiety, sensitization and repressing can be tracked back to this guy Byrne. According to him, sensitizers develop a chronically increased activation level which excludes a sudden and unexpected increase of activation on the basis of further anxiety stimuli. The contrast repressors try to turn away their attention from threatening situations as much as possible in order to avoid anxiety. The preferences with respect to media consumptions and with the respect to program preferences, such as they turn their attentions primarily to information content compatible with their anxiety, corresponding they are likely to consume the so-called ideal world programs. I wonder if this also explains the rise in young adult dystopian media. I think that's interesting. Anxiety-evoking media programs could have long-term negative effects, especially for children. As early as 1933, Bloomer reported that 93% of children in this study were frightened or horrified by media pictures. I have my own story about this. Not from 1933. When I was a kid, I skipped school one day, middle school. I skipped middle school one day, and I watched, it was this Orson Welles narrated this movie. I want to say it was like this movie about Nostradamus, and he starts talking about he's reading these quatrains or whatever, and he starts talking about how Nostradamus is predicting global warming. That's what they called it back then. They called it global warming. And it was like basically the world was going to burn up. It was going to leave people as like cannibals, and they had like these painting illustrations of like what mankind is going to like devolve into while they're like eating other people's flesh and all this stuff. And I freaked the fuck out. I freaked out, bros. I remember sitting, like, I can't remember, it was like, they had a date. It was like by the year, in the year 2000, this was going to happen. I remember sitting down and doing the math and trying to figure out how old my sister was going to be and how old my little brother was going to be when all this shit went down. I remember praying to God to not let this global warming happen. It's ridiculous now. And then like another thing is probably around the same, I remember it was the same house. I imagine it was the same time period. Like Ted fucking Danson would do this thing at the end of Cheers where he was like, global warming's coming and it's going to burn all the fish out of the ocean and everyone's going to fucking starve to death. And we really got to do something about all this global warming. Dude, that was in the early 80s. Oh my God. I remember I was terrified. So just a few weeks ago, my time is way different from your time because you're listening to this like a month and a half from when I'm recording it. But everyone's talking about like this Green New Deal now and everything. And I just read this article about how these millennials are having climate change anxiety problems and all this stuff. And I'm like, I've been there, bros. I've done that. I've lived through all this climate change anxiety issues. It's so funny. It's hilarious. And I need a break. We're going to do this. Hey, last month I made an appearance on a couple different podcasts, so I want to give a shout out to them. Women Behind the Veil. I was their first male guest host on there last month. It was a great thing. They do a show that's all about kick-ass women in history, and they get into historical females and females of the occult and females ideals of the occult. They did a great episode on Kali and the Black Madonna. I learned some stuff from them. So it was fun. We talked all about Boudica and Boudica's revolt against the Roman Empire. So yeah, that's interesting. So go check them out. And then I was also on Magic and mediums. We were on there. She asked me to come on to talk about ceremonial magic. So that was interesting. She does a podcast that's all about all different forms of magic and psychic abilities and all that stuff. So I had a lot of fun going on there and talking about ceremonial magic with her. So you can find both of those podcasts wherever you find your podcasts. I'm sure you'll be able to locate them. While I have you, don't forget to go to subscribestar.com. For exclusive audio content. There's 14 exclusive episodes you can only find on Subscribestar right now. Don't forget to hit up abercast.com. There's a bunch of great stuff, including a shop. We're now going to be selling vessels of the art, which are these big mason jars with the logo on them, with the Abercast logo on them. So check that out. Check out our Facebook page, our YouTube. And don't forget this month, the American Sermon is turning into the Sermon of the Wolf. We're doing a great 6-part deep dive into lycanthropy and werewolfism over there. So if you're interested in that shit, I ask you to go check it out. Thank you guys. All right, we're moving on to the next section. It's called effective involvement. Involvement as a meta concept encompasses a family of related, though distinct concepts, which inform us on how the users are occupied with the media and its content, and how they engage with them in a cognitive, affective, and conative, in a motivational way. The conative components can be traced back to Rothschild, as everything can. No, I'm just kidding. Rothschild and Ray, it's a different study. The cognitive component can be found in the literature of involvement, most frequently affective involvement, defined as the sensation of intense feelings or affective statements. It is studied slightly less often. Researchers studying affective involvement usually make a theoretical and or empirical distinction between cognitive and affective involvement. Park and McClung considered emotional involvement to mean the subjective experience of the media or a commercial spot, while cognitive involvement means the processing of issue-oriented information. Some researchers subsume parasocial interactions under effective involvement. However, other scholars argue that parasocial interaction, what the fuck does that even mean? Interactions itself encompass effective, cognitive, and conative components. I'm going to skip ahead here. Effective involvement appears in the use of a wide variety of informational content, like the news, such as health campaigns, news, or the search for information on the internet. This guy's name is Chattahari, but I always see Chitauri. He's got an army. He's Loki's army of Chitauri, and Buck conducted comparative studies on the effective involvement in TV and print commercials per se, found that emotional and cognitive involvement are correlated. Feeling angry and feeling sad were linked to elaboration on crime and government related news. So think about this next time you're watching Rachel Maddow. Moreover, persons who use news for entertainment indicated that they felt happy and satisfied. Therefore, I just accidentally brought up an interesting idea, right? The conflation of news and entertainment. So think about now I know everybody's like, where do you get your news from? Everyone's like the New York Post, CNN, the HuffPo, like whatever. But you know these motherfuckers are lying. You know they get their news from Saturday Night Live and the fucking Colbert Report and like Jon Stewart. No, Jon Stewart was the Green Lantern. Who's the other one? Is he even still on? Is it Jon Stewart? My uncle looks just like him. My uncle actually looks like a cross between Jon Stewart and Rachel Maddow. I fucking swear to God. I swear to God, too. I swear and swear to God. When I look at him, and he's a crazy leftist, you know, all these guys, all these people in my family have had nervous breakdowns and they come out the other end as these fucking crazy liberals. And I'm like, that's what happened. Jon Stewart and Rachel Maddow had a breakdown. My fucking uncle came out as like some kind of mutant amalgamation of them. Anyhow, it's in... Where was I? Oh, the blending of news and entertainment. And look at late night TV. You know, I was raised on like Johnny Carson, and there's recently been an interview brought up from like, not Ed Bradley, but like someone, one of those fucking dipsticks from 2020. Were interviewing Johnny Carson. They were like, how come you never talk about politics? And he was like, hey man, people live out their whole day by the time I get to them. And I'm sure they just want to laugh and have fun. Now you take that, the king of late night, like literally, and you juxtapose that with any of these assholes that are on now. You can, you know, we can hear like Jimmy Kimmel could be in blackface making fun of Karl Malone not understanding the English language, and that's okay. That's cool. You know, and then in the next, you know, well, obviously the next breath, like 20 years later, you know, he's crying and talking to us about his children's health care or something. Like, it's all to shit. And I believe that this is, a lot of this is why. It's this Chitarian book thing. We know that cognitive involvement has a positive effect on knowledge acquisition, and it sounds fascinating. In learning, the knowledge acquisition should also benefit from active involvement. Could it be true? The results are not very encouraging. Shoemaker, Schuler, and Danielson did not find any correlation between effective involvement in recall or cognition for individuals who rely on newspaper or television. It goes in one ear, they keep the talking points, and it goes right out. Shafi and Roser did not find any correlation between the perceived risk of heart disease and or as an indicator for effective involvement in the consistency between attitude, knowledge, and behavior in the case of long-term health intervention campaign. Lowe did not find a correlation between attitude, extremity as an indicator for yada, yada. We're just going to move on to the next one. We're going to move on. Entertainment. Though the scientific community still debates whether entertainment is an emotion. Oh, that's interesting. It's just trying not to be bored, I guess. There is a consensus that entertainment is fostered by emotions and has an emotional component. It is widely believed that the entertainment is a non-professional leisure activity that is not subject to any form of constraint. It does not provide material or extrinsic initiatives. It has the main function of a person feels good. And in this way, the layperson's understanding is not too far away from what the science has found out about the phenomenon of entertainment. So far, if one asks the recipient what entertainment means for them, the following empirical dimensions of meaning unfold. Psychological relaxation. It is a restful and refreshing, light and distracting. Let's all take a moment to appreciate that. Refreshing, light, and distracting. Change and diversion. It offers variety and diversity. Not that kind of diversity. Stimulation. It's dynamic, interesting, exciting, and thrilling. Fun. It is merry, amusing, and funny. Atmosphere. It is beautiful, good, pleasant, and comfortable. Joy. It is happy and cheerful. Okay, note that only emotional aspects or aspects with emotional implications are mentioned. Nobody will deny that entertainment has something to do with emotions. We are dealing with a specific emotion rather than mixed emotions. According to Vordier, entertainment is a multi-dimensional reception phenomenon with motivational, emotional, and effect-relevant aspects. Bosshart and Marconi argue this way, too, in that they see parallels between entertainment and, quote, pleasure, unquote. According to Hausmaninger, I guess. I'm sure this gentleman, this lady, this Frau or gentleman is German. Hausmaninger. Pleasure is a multi-dimensional construct too. Pleasure is the sense, as in the use of physical abilities or in the experience of motor and sensory activity. Pleasure of the ego, or emotions, as in evoking and experiencing emotions or in the mood management. Pleasure of the personal wit and knowledge, which is my wheelhouse, obviously, as in the use of cognitive or intellectual powers and competence to be able to use one's wit. And pleasure in the social emotions, such as the ability to feel an emotion with and for others, to identify with others. According to Bosshart and Marconi, these dimensions could easily be transferred to the entertainment experience. Apart from the fact that the pleasure per se is already an emotional category, and it's obvious that the two categories are predominantly mentioned, ego and socio-emotions, which have been central to Section 3 of this review. Voldemort, Clement, and Richterfield regard enjoyment as the core of multidimensional construct. It's like the Tesseract, entertainment, and thus assume that it is a crucial point or center for this semantic spectrum reception phenomenon and contrast. Frew considers entertainment to be a state of experience on a subordinate level. I guess this is interesting. I'm not sure. If someone were to ask me what entertainment means to me, I literally just told you what it was. It was like, I'm trying just something that makes me not bored. That's not work, I guess, which is silly because I'm a workaholic. Anyhow, entertainment results as a macro emotion and contains different components of the respective underlying specific micro emotions. These micro emotions could be, for example, an aspect that could have been mentioned by Bosshart and Marconi, such as joy, fun, or relaxation, but micro emotions could also be negative emotions, such as anger and distrust or grief. On the background of controlled process, all micro emotions are transformed into a macro emotions. For the sake of stability. Okay, well, all right. So this is it. I'm pulling the chute on this one. I am John Towers. This has been the Abercast, and this is we are continuing on our our trek, our journey, our investigation into how media affects us here on the Abercast. Thank you very much. Thank you. Character flaws. God damn it. Character flaws? They make them relatable. Here, let's just do a few of my favorites right off the top of my head. Favorite characters. We'll stick to favorite movie characters. Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China. He's deeply flawed. He's arrogant. He's hot-headed. He's ignorant. like literally ignorant. If it's not playing cards or trucks, he's not any good at it. Not even guns. Remember, he's trying to shoot and he didn't take the safety cap off. He is brave, and he does ignorantly take initiative a lot. Another flaw is he's a smart ass. He's a braggart. Oh boy, let's see. Okay, well, Private First Class Hudson. He's a colonial space marine from Aliens. Maybe I have a type. He's high strung. He's stressed out. He's also a smart ass. We can identify with him because he's a short timer. He says that I think he says he's a few weeks short. But he's good at what he does. He's good in a fight. He's that computer hacker of the platoon. So he's very proficient in getting these computers up and running and stuff. After a certain point, he's got a fuck it mentality. But I mean, remember the way he went out. He went out with his through the whole movie, he's fucking, him and Vasquez are fucking with each other, but they go out together. They eat that grenade together to buy time and to kill that alien. See, so well, hold on, I'll just hold my fire for a second. Han Solo, probably one of my favorite movie character of all time, rebel general and smuggler. He's arrogant and he's cocky, and when we first meet him, he's greedy. He is highly skilled. He's a pilot and a smuggler. He's oftentimes untrusting or distrustful of people, especially if they've burned him in the past. When we first meet him, he's a mercenary. This is the first shadow of the redemption story that is Star Wars. He's doubtful. He's skeptical of the Force. He's like, hey, bro, I've been to all different parts of this galaxy, and I never seen any mystic field that steers my destiny, or whatever he says. So, I mean, he's rife with these character flaws. But like, look, on the flip side, he would do anything. He would never tell them the odds, right? He will fight he will challenge any odds for his friends. There's nothing he wouldn't do for his friends. When Luke's, out in the field in Hoth, and he's talking to the deck officer, and the deck officer's like, it's freezing out there. Your tauntaun's going to freeze before it hits the first marker. And he was like, that's right. And my friend's out in it. Oh, that's when the guy says, your tauntaun will freeze before it hits the first marker. And he's like, I'll see you in hell. He's challenging those odds to make sure his friend is safe. See, it's things like this. Flawed character. There's not all the money in the world. I'll give you more treasure than you ever see, or that you can imagine. He's like, right, bitch, I can imagine a lot. See, that's a shitbag human being to start out with. And he has this awesome character. He's got this awesome arc because of these character flaws. Again, he's another smart ass, right? One more. We'll just do one more. Oh, here's a good one. Peter Venkman. He's a doctor of parapsychology and a entrepreneur, Ghostbuster. He's sort of cowardly, right? He's never the first one he's never the first one up the stairs, or never the first one to challenge a ghost. He is not proficient in science at all. He treats science like a hustle or a dodge. He's more like a talk show host than a scientist, right? Or a game show host than a scientist. He's kind of a slimy dude. He comes off as kind of potentially a womanizer, you would think, like the way he was trying to seduce his student at the beginning of that first movie. He's a loudmouth. He's overconfident, widely earned swagger, and he's a smartass, you know. Now, none of the characters in Ghostbusters really have a arc. Like, literally, it's a movie that has no arc. But the point of it is that this character is relatable because of his flaws. You know, there's honorable mentions, you know, Vic Mackey from The Shield, or Jack Bauer, two wildly flawed, you know, characters. And all of these guys go through, okay, so all of them go through trials and tribulations to fulfill their story arc, or to gain their skill or their position. Now, think about something like Rey from Star Wars. She has no trials. She has no tribulation. The second she picks up a lightsaber, she can, you know, hold her own and defeat, you know, the most powerful Force user that we've ever seen. He could freeze laser blasts in the air with the Force. Unearned, untrained, pick up a lightsaber, and she could fight this guy, hold her own, and defeat him. Her skill set is totally unlittered with flaws. She's perfect. And the reason that everybody freaked out, one of the reasons everybody freaked out in The Last Jedi, is because she had nothing in her backstory except for waiting for her parents in that first The Force Awakens movie. So when they dropped the bomb that her parents were literally nobody, like, there was nothing left to her besides this totally clean, like, she's burdened by the ease in which she can accomplish these things. Like, in the fucking movie, she's born and raised, or she lived for years or whatever on a desert planet. But in The Last Jedi, she falls into that swimming pool and she can fucking swim. You know, it's just, there's no character flaws. So let's do one that's a little bit closer to the mark for me. I don't identify as a Star Wars fan anymore. But let's look at a character like Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel. Again, like, you see her kind of struggle to spar with her boss, Jan Rog, or whatever, you know, and, you know, she does pretty good with him, you know, but, you know, the same thing can be said as she powers up, she can, all of a sudden she can fly, and she knows exactly how to fly, and she's knocking these fucking rockets and stuff out of the sky, and she's having fun while she's doing it. There is no flaw. You know, it's funny because the movie makes her being a woman her flaw. You know, like all the flashbacks of all the flyboys bullying her or whatever. Like, her flaw is that she's got a vagina. That's the way the movie treats it. Yeah, so, I mean, look at these great classic characters I just mentioned, and then bounce them up next to these Mary Sues. And you can see why our state of storytelling is fucking falling apart. Anyhow, this doesn't have really much to do with the emotions in media, except for that one part, towards the end there, where it was like, relatable characters. It makes them easier to manipulate, like, to sway your emotions, and that's obvious, I would think. But so I just wanted to just beep in here at the end and kind of talk about some of my favorite characters and see, you know, bring some fucking attention about how you know, you should have character flaws. So, all right. All right, it's John. Hey, swing on over to subscribestar.com/Abercast. You can find like 14 exclusive episodes over there, but along with a whole bunch of other good stuff. We have one tier right now. It's the fellow, I guess, or The Apprentice. I can't remember what it is. It's just $3 tier. You get access to everything that is up there currently right now. So go on over and support the show. Don't forget to go to abercast.com. You can find our social media links there. You can sign into the mailing list. When you sign into the mailing list, you get graphic elements. You get a link to graphic elements that have to do with the show. So worksheets, notes, graphic elements. We have an episode of the Kabbalah coming up this month. So you can find all like the Tree of Life map and the different the 3 different triangles that we're talking about, the lightning bolt path through the different Sephiroths, all that stuff is there. While you're there, please check on some comic books or graphic novels. Also, we're trying a new thing. We have a shop opened up at abercast.com. I have a couple vessels of the art left over from the giveaways last month, and some people reached out to me and asked me about, they were like, fuck the giveaways, can I just buy one? So yes, now you can. If that was a question that you had, just stop on over at the shop. I have a few on hand and I have an order in for more, so go ahead and act now. I don't know how long we're going to keep doing it. So that's it. Check out the Facebook page. It's super easy to find. It's just the Abercast or Abercast. And also, if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, you might want to check out our YouTube channel. And just a quick reminder, the American Sermon, which is a spin-off podcast, is becoming the Sermon of the Wolf. We're doing a 6-part deep dive into werewolfism. So if you weren't interested in American bullshit, but you might be interested in werewolf bullshit, just go ahead and find it. Most places that good podcasts can be found. We're still working on Spotify and those sorts of places, but it's on iTunes and Stitcher and all the different apps and all that stuff. So thanks.